That was so fun.
Oh, that feels good.
If I don't get hurt before. Hey, apple cider.
I'm gonna sit right here. And I'll be on my dears, can we all sit on the rug facing me? I'll be sitting on that table. I'll be sitting right here. It is sometimes hard to get your body weight.
I'm coming in.
Alrighty. Bum, ba-da-dum, bum. Alright, we are transitioning to read aloud. Friends, I want to let you know that as the last little part of my student teaching, because I'm learning how to be a teacher, I have to record myself for a little bit.
You're not going to be here after what's your break, are you?
So right now my camera is recording, but that's fine.
You'll still be.
It's fine. There's nothing to distract you. I just wanted to let you guys know because it's not.
Oh my God!
It doesn't feel good.
Hey, y'all!
Alright.
Camera. Hi, camera.
Everyone can say hi. Well,
Yo, peace out, y'all.
and cut.
I want to see myself. Hey, you use mine.
Sorry, Luke. I did grab your. Do you mind? So I just.
Yes, he minds.
Do you want me to use something else?
You can use mine. You can use mine right now.
I know that this was okay yesterday, but it's not okay today. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to sit independently. Thank you.
Let's see if I can do this. Nope, that's going to cover it. Nothing, it's fine. I'm just covering my screen so people aren't distracted.
And so the Yankee Minds.
Alright, thank you.
Kids who are changing the world.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria.
You're not.
Alright. So we stopped in the middle of a little bit of a chapter because we were on our way to lunch choice. But we just found something that we thought was missing.
The D.
My question for a raised hand is what did we think was missing and how was it relocated? Yes, Reese.
So what happened was they were missing the deed that made that to make sure the house was like there to be paid for. And Eleanor remembered that the crumpled piece of paper that she saw when the dog had when she went back in time, and then she remembered that and she found it with the what's it called? Autograph thing on it, and then the Ralph Street guy probably was mad. He was
Yes. So Eddie's family thought that they didn't have a right to the house that they were living in, and they couldn't find the deed. But Eleanor realized that she brought the deed back from the past on the time by accident. But there's one little weird thing about it, which is, remember when Oliver Winslow brought the green?
Yes, I think it might dissolve.
The green monster back, and it dissolved. But the deed didn't dissolve. Do you think it's going to dissolve?
No.
Yes.
Okay, why or why not? I'll take a raised hand. Yes, Sylvie.
Because if he had taken it in the first place, it would still be there.
Yeah, can you put that away, please?
If he took it, it still wouldn't be there.
I'm not sure I understand.
If she hadn't taken it, like if she had just left and without that, it would still be at the house with them.
Ah.
But he didn't take it.
So she took it from the right place to the right place. That it would still be in the house had she not taken it. Interesting. Yes, Carmen.
I think you can only bring something back when you're not bring something back or change it when you're not trying to do that.
So maybe you
When
can.
you like have no idea, like when you just like randomly do that thing.
You can only make changes by accident. I'll take Jasper and Charles.
I think you can bring things from the past if the bike isn't in something because it was in the trunk of the car and that's how it dissolves, so it can't be a too big thing to bring back.
So maybe there's a size issue. Yes, Charles?
It shouldn't dissolve because it was there before the green horse, and the green horse dissolved, and the green horse bigger than the deed, so it should have dissolved if it was to dissolve.
Alright, I'm going to read the paragraph right before we left off. Well, I'm going to keep reading. She knew what he was thinking, and she thought so too. In spite of all their mistakes and disasters, the time bike had been good for something after all. And somehow, although Oliver's crazy car, the Green Forer, had vanished into thin air after its astonishing return from last year, in spite of that fact, the marvelous quitclaim deed, proclaiming that a certain parcel of land was the property of Uncle Freddy's direct ancestor, had remained safely in Eleanor's pocket all the time. It had not disappeared. Why not? Well, it was simple, really. Eleanor figured it out. The wonderful deed was only a single piece of paper, not two. Whereas Oliver's car from last year had tried to crash its way into a world that already contained a green horror, and that had been impossible. So, because the deed wasn't in the world where they brought it to, it was able to come back. Very interesting.
You'll never have a green horse and you'll figure it out.
You could bring like diamonds.
Perhaps. Not till later on, not till after the rejoicing was over and the hugging and dancing up and down and the slappings on the back, not till Aunt Alex said, "Oh," and opened the refrigerator door to pull out a bottle and say, "I knew there was champagne in here somewhere." Not till then did Eleanor take the paper back from Uncle Freddy and turn it over to see the signature on the back. It was another miracle. She smiled to herself and smoothed the precious sprinkled sheet. So, whose autograph was it? Yes, Cassius?
I bet it's that guy that she tried to save from the future.
So we tried to save Derek Alabaster.
But he was the bodyguard.
And the guy who, and one of his like attendants, the guy, the driver, or the kid in the car signed his. But it sounds like it's going to be another miracle, so it's someone who we think it might be. Yes, Joseph? Maybe it's Uncle Freddy's signature. Maybe Uncle Freddy worked for Derek Alabaster? Yeah, Carmen? Or Henry Thoreau. But why wouldn't it be Henry Thoreau? Oh, but maybe. I'm thinking of two different time traveling times. Henry Thoreau is the poet who's been coming up every once in a while in this book. Could it have been Henry Thoreau?
No.
I'm not sure, actually. They're trying to.
Eleanor's that interested.
Let's see, Sylvie?
What's the signature of the guy that was in the car?
Yeah, that's what we think. All right. It was another miracle. She smiled to herself and smoothed the precious wrinkled sheet. She had failed to get the autograph she wanted, the signature of Derek Alabaster, but on the back of the deed to number 40 Walden Street, there was another wonderful name in bold handwriting. The boy who had scribbled his autograph on the back of the deed to number 40 Walden Street was none other than Gary Stewart. Gary Stewart himself. He must have been a young beginning actor back in 1938, but even then he had guessed what a famous heartthrob he was going to be. He had known what a superstar he was about to become. Eleanor showed the signature to Eddie, and he had to admit he was impressed. Gary Stewart! You saw Gary Stewart in person! Wow. So who's Gary Stewart?
Famous actor.
Another famous actor.
Actor.
All right. We are arriving to our final chapter.
Dun, dun, dun.
All right, I'm going to tell you the name of the chapter, and we can go with predictions. predictions. A ship on the seas of time. A ship on the seas of time. Any predictions? This doesn't give us a lot of information. Yeah, Cassius?
They're kind of going back to the theme of time and
When I go fishing,
Time, they,
it's but the stream I go fishing.
what, can someone say that quote really loudly? Yeah,
I
Blair?
just got time and stream when I go fishing.
Wait a
Time
second,
is but the stream I go fishing in.
Wait, Leah, can you raise your hand and say it? That was a big loud voice. Yes, Leah?
Time is but the stream I go fishing in.
Time is but the stream I go
fishing.
Alright. The next time someone came to the front door, it was Oliver Winslow. Friends, can we keep our hands out of this box? Gavin? Gavin's hands off the box. Thank you.
Going my lips together.
Georgie was skipping rope in the front hall beside the bust of Henry Thoreau. She kept on jumping, but she smiled at Oliver and she bounced up and down, her feet pattering lightly on the floor. My mom wants a dozen eggs, okay? Said Oliver, looking through the bulge of the screen. Hey, is Eddie home? One of the cats sauntered out of the parlor, followed by Eleanor. He was here a minute ago, said Eleanor. She shouted, Eddie! Hey, Eddie! 99, 100, gasped Georgie and stopped jumping. Well, come on in, Oliver, said Eleanor. The eggs are in the kitchen. Another cat skittered down the stairs. Oh, hi there, Oliver, said Eddie, thundering down after the cat. Hey, Eddie, said Oliver. There's this incredible new TV series, and it's really fabulous. Like, there's this astronaut, and he takes off in a spacecraft, and then the whole entire world blows up. Oh, hi, Mrs. Hall. My mom wants a dozen eggs. A lot of people straggled out of the schoolroom, talking and laughing. Uncle Freddie's students with their notebooks under their arms. They said hello and goodbye to Eddie and Eleanor and Aunt Alex and Georgie, and then Arthur Hathaway stepped on one of the cats. It yowled. The screen door banged. Uncle Freddie emerged from the schoolroom with his lecture notes and said hello to Oliver. Aunt Alex and Oliver disappeared into the kitchen. Georgie ran outdoors. Eleanor whisked past Eddie and hurried upstairs, and Uncle Freddie left the house to walk up the street to a meeting with the other selectmen. Eddie was left alone in the front hall, alone if you didn't count the plaster bust of Henry at the foot of the stairs and the metal figure of Mrs. Truth on the newel post. Gently, he pulled aside the curtain and looked at the time bike. Its travels were over. The clock that had guided it forward and backward through time was lying in smithereens on the sand of an ancient shore, and some of its precious gears had washed out to sea. The rocket-shaped headlights still shone bravely on the wall of the coat closet, but the rims of the wheels were encrusted with prehistoric sand, and so was the wicker basket. Yes, Charles?
I think the magic of the time like going to the ocean and then like the ship coming forward in time. Not gonna be in Titanic or something.
Whoa, so maybe because all of the gears of the time-traveling bike have washed away into the ocean will now have time-traveling powers? Yes, Gavin?
I think that it's gonna wash into the ocean. So they're gonna be going like they're gonna be going to because the thing that made the time go back is with Eddie.
Lots of interesting predictions. I'm not sure.
I think Eddie's gonna say it doesn't matter.
I'll take a hand, Luke. Yeah, Luke?
I think Eddie's gonna say it doesn't matter, and he's never gonna get home, and then he's just gonna drop the thingy, and then it's gonna wash away into the ocean, and then he's gonna say, "Hey, what happened to the ocean?" And then he's gonna go in it, and then he's gonna time travel back to his house.
I like the interpretation of time as a stream being literal.
But
Like a literal time stream.
When I go fishing.
Yes, Cassius.
but
Wait a second, I'm listening to Cassius. Wait a second, Cassius. Sorry, continue.
Isn't he already in the time zone he was usually in?
He's in the right time period, yes.
So he doesn't need to go forward.
Yes, not anymore unless he wanted to. This time, like, yes, I'll take the last comment from Elliot. Reading.
What was that Gary guy's name again?
Gary Stewart.
Gary Barbera.
All right. All right. Idly, Eddie reached into the basket and took out the shell he had picked up on the beach. It was the kind called a Chambered Nautilus, and something twanged in his brain. A wisp of a memory from the old days when the diamond in the attic window had done such astonishing things. Hadn't there been something about a ship of pearl? Well, that was all over now. And this was over too. Eddie took the shell into the parlor, set it down on the mantelpiece, and went looking for Oliver Winslow. Yes?
I think the prediction of making the ocean is right, making it like go forward and backward in time, but instead of like bringing back the Titanic or anything, it's gonna bring back pirate ships. Like black.
Colony, maybe.
The makeup classes in the Sanborn school were over, and so for the rest of the summer, Eddie and Eleanor lived from moment to moment, enjoying the here and now. But they couldn't help noticing that their summer with the time bike had some peculiar consequences. The first was the loss of Eddie's sneakers, 2 large shoes bought in Concord at the beginning of the 3rd millennium by a young Concord citizen with very large feet, had been left on a sandy shore in a remote area in the distant past. "I'm sorry, Aunt Alex," said Eddie. "Look, I'm busting out of last year's sneakers." He held up one foot to show her the way his toes stuck out of the holes. Aunt Alex looked up from her typewriter. She was puzzled. "But what happened to your new sneakers, Eddie dear?" "I don't know," said Eddie. "I'm afraid they're gone for good." So Aunt Alex drove him to Lexington for a huge new pair of shoes. A second item on the list was the change in Amanda Upshaw. One Saturday afternoon, Eleanor nearly collided with her on Main Street. Amanda was coming out of a dress shop, carrying a pink paper bag. Eleanor smiled and said, "Well, hello there, Amanda." Amanda looked at her in surprise. Eleanor Hall looked different somehow, really so incredibly different. "I'm having some kids over this afternoon," said Amanda. "Want to come?" What's she gonna say?
No. No.
Wait a second, she was really trying to go to Amanda Upshaw's party this whole book. Do you think she's gonna go?
No.
Why says no? Why do you think so? Tried so hard, she's made it up. Yes, Reese.
So, another thing that he forgot about, I think, is the red button that he got at the beginning.
So we have a loose end. We have that red bike he never actually got back from Monkey Pool. Yeah, then I need your kids out of the book. Yes, Reese.
I think he'll turn the red bike.
Leah, can I have you fix forward, please?
I think he'll turn the red bike into the time.
Ooh, a transformation of sorts. Should I finish this book today or should we?
Okay, we got it.
We have 4 more pages.
Can you?
Can we
This is what's happening.
pages for that one?
Yeah, I mean, can you guys pay attention?
Yeah.
I mean, if you want Sam to finish, she will, but you gotta.
Yeah, Charles.
What's the whole point of taking a bike if you're not gonna ride until it goes crazy? It's gonna see you in color.
That's a funny question. Maybe people can't go out in public with the bike he stole because then he won't know that it's a bike. All right. Oh no, I'm sorry, said Eleanor, starting across the street. "I can't come today, nor any other day. So sorry, Amanda." The third thing was a sharp crash one day as the cuckoo clock fell off the wall and smashed on the floor, just as Eddie galloped by. Thumping heavily in his new shoes, he stopped short in dismay and watched as the little plastic bird wobbled on its spring and croaked a last dying cuckoo, the wrong time as usual. Aunt Alex ran out of the schoolroom and saw the shattered pieces on the floor. "I didn't touch it, Aunt Alex," said Eddie. "Absolutely not," and he burst out laughing. Aunt Alex laughed too. Eleanor ran down the stairs to see what was happening, and she too was convulsed. So was Uncle Freddie coming out of the kitchen. Georgie wasn't sure what was funny, but she laughed with everybody else. What does it mean to convulse?
I don't know.
Start laughing.
What in this context? In this context. Yeah, Calvin? Yeah, to keel over giggling. Mm. Well, it was a cuckoo clock anyway, said Eddie, picking up the pieces. The fourth thing was an amazing remark by a scientific friend of Uncle Freddie's. One day, the friend noticed the shell on the mantelpiece, the chambered nautilus Eddie had brought back from that ancient seashore. How interesting, he said. An extinct example of the suborder Tetrabenchiata nautiloidea. How on earth did you find one in such perfect condition? Uncle Freddie shook his head. He had no idea. The fifth thing was the amazing relighting of Mrs. Truth's star-shaped lamp. Soon after Eddie's bicycle came plunging home from a faraway past, he noticed that the bulb in the rocket-shaped headlight was at last growing dim, and he gave it an encouraging whack. At once it sputtered out, but at the same instant, to his flabbergasted surprise, the light flared up in the glassy star held high in the hand of Mrs. Truth. After that, of course, the front hall was no longer gloomy and dark. It was lit by some sort of blazing 1,000-watt bulb. Every part of the hall was now exposed in all its dinkiness. Aunt Alex was startled to see the dust under the umbrella stand and the greasy finger marks on the kitchen door. She told herself that she would clean the house very soon. Well, as soon as her lectures were ready for the fall. But of course, she wouldn't polish away the new stains on the bronze skirts of Mrs. Truth, because they looked like pictures. There was a blotch like a bicycle, and another like a rooster, and all down one side of her long metal gown, a scattering of spots like little wheels and gears. That's weird. What's going on? They have a little statue of like Lady Liberty, of Miss Truth, and her skirt is covered in some interesting designs. Maybe someone who hasn't spoken yet. We have a lot of people up at the front. Yeah, Blue? In your big third grade voice.
A time traveler thingy, or it has all the pieces on it of the body.
It has. What's the rooster about?
The rooster in the backyard.
Oh, alright. I know, but I want to finish it.
Nature's class.
I know. There was a sixth new thing that was impossible to explain. Neither Eddie nor Eleanor could have put it into words, but for both of them, something in the air had changed. And not just in the air, but in the house too. It flowed along the mill brook across the street, and rustled in the trees, and shone in the sun, moon, and stars. From now on and forever after, Eleanor would be standing in a narrow crack in time, and Eddie too, one foot in the past and another in the future. The thing that everyone called now, this quick passing moment right here, right now, was only a speck, a snap of the fingers, and yet it was also something more enormous and vast. Eddie, said Uncle Freddie one day in the middle of August, if you're not going to ride your bicycle anymore, could you put it somewhere else? Aunt Alex and I could use that corner under the stairs for our file cabinets. There's no space left in the schoolroom. So the time bike was removed to a permanent safe home in the attic. Eddie's wonderful bicycle that had transported Eleanor to the Concord of 60 years ago and carried Eddie himself a little way into the future and far, far back into the past. Prince Krishna's gift, the time bike, was mothballed like a battleship after a war. Eddie lifted it up the 2 flights of stairs, trying not to run into railings and door frames, bumping into them just the same, knocking chips of paint off the woodwork. In the attic, he set it reverently down in the middle of the floor, next to the snowflake wedding gown and right behind the box in which the old American flags had been so carefully laid away. Friends in the back, do you guys need to move so that we can finish this? Do you? Or are you fine?
I'm getting shoved over.
You're getting shoved over, so do you feel like you need to move?
You know what, I'm gonna ask everybody here, just move to a different spot, either come sit beside the rug, so.
Over here.
Yeah, Blue and Chicky, yeah, could you guys move, I feel like it's just becoming a distraction.
We are reaching our very nearly end.
How many more pages?
1. 1 page. When he came loping downstairs again, Aunt Alex was sitting at her desk in the hall with a pen in her hand. She looked up at Eddie and said, "I'm writing to Prince Krishna and your Aunt Lily. Do you want to add anything, Eddie dear?" He paused halfway down the stairs and said, "Just give them my love, Aunt Alex." Then he jumped down the 6 remaining steps, skidded on the rug, and crashed into the radiator. So their adventures in time were over. Or were they? Surely the old house at number 40 Walden Street was something like a time machine itself. The future flowed into it and through every crack and crevice and window and door, and the present snapped and crackled inside as the 5 members of the family tumbled around from room to room, carrying on their daily lives. And then at last, the ribbon of time unrolled up the stairs to store away the past in the hollow spaces of the attic. If you were to walk along Walden Street past number 40 and glance up at its funny tower and Victorian porches, you'd never think it was a monument to the flow of time, and yet it was. Or perhaps Eddie had a dream about it one night. Perhaps the house was a high, creaking ship, pitching forward and wallowing in the seas of time, its sails ballooning from chimney and attic, from porch and tower. While Aunt Alex's chickens clucked on the quarterdeck, and the cats meowed, and the rigging, and the rooster crowed from the main top, and a handsome figurehead lighted the way with her outstretched lamp. And Henry stood staunchly at the wheel, his plaster hair tossing in the breeze. The front porch, of course, was the bow of the ship, and there they all stood, Uncle Freddie and Aunt Alex and Georgie and Eleanor and Eddie, leaning over the railing, peering into the mists of time. "What do you see?" shouted Eddie. "Nothing," bawled Uncle Freddie. "It's too foggy out there," squealed Georgie. "I can't make out a thing," cried Aunt Alex. "You can't see your hand in front of your face," screamed Eleanor. But on the peak of the topmast, the rooster, who could see farther than anybody, crowed, "Arf, arf, aroo!" The end. Here's the pictures. That was amazing. Okay, final comments, and then we're going to transition to math. Final comments about your entire time bike experience. I got a lot of hands in the front, and I'm wondering if people in the back have a. I'll take Geo.
Wow.
Did you like that book? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Colin?
The book was awesome.
Good. Lucas?
I think the book was okay, but it was too boring in the end.
We didn't get enough time travel drama.
Yeah.
Jasper, then Joseph.
I'm so good. I'm glad they got to a part that we were predicting all the time.
Okay, my last question is, how do we, without time travel machines, how do we time travel in the present? We was talking about the house as a time traveling machine, how we're kind of all time travelers. What does that mean? Callie, we're facing this way. What does that mean? Yes, Ellie?
We're always like moving in time. So like now is now, and now from back there it's the future.
Yes. So now from yesterday is the future. Tomorrow from today is the future. Yesterday's in the past. So we're all time traveling at a rate of 1 second per second. Last comment from Reese.
So I have 2 things. My first thing is every second we're in the future, and also are amazing.
Nice. All right. Thank you, friends. I'm going to ask you to get up, take a lap around the library, and come back and circle the rock.
Yeah.